What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have something super awesome to share with you guys, the Protean by Flygonial. This thing is a beast. It has so many really cool options, really cool choices you can make, and I cannot wait to share it with you guys. So let's check this baby out. All right, so the Protean by Flygonial is a flywheel modular Nerf blaster. Modular meaning that you can swap out the flywheel cage, the whole front assembly, the pusher assembly, and the stock to pretty much any variant you could possibly think of, which is pretty darn sweet. Just remove a few pins and you can swap those right out. So that is pretty darn awesome. The Protean is kind of the predecessor to the Griffin, but honestly, I think this is much more up my alley. I really love the way this thing looks and the ability to make this thing shoot anywhere between probably 100 FPS or even less than that, all the way up to possibly 300 FPS is pretty darn incredible. So we'll definitely check out a few options there today. Let's go over kind of what the current setup is here and probably the main setup for me personally. This is around 200, maybe just a touch under FPS setup. Currently, we have band blaster motors and flywheels in here to achieve that on a single stage. We have the really responsive and pretty darn sweet semi-auto setup here, which is a geared pusher setup, which makes it really smooth and responsive. Really awesome, really like that a lot. Obviously, you have your rev trigger down here. This is currently only Talon compatible, but I understand that he is making a full-length version in the future, so that is to come. There's a few options still in beta for this. There's also supposed to be a select fire option for this middle assembly part, and I believe there is a full auto option, but I think it is still in beta that uses a solenoid, which is pretty awesome. But currently, I think the files are only shared for the semi-auto for public use, and that's what I have set up here, which is it's a really, really nice semi-auto setup, so that is really cool. And then there are tons of different stock options currently. This is a battery stock. There's a few different battery stock options. This is a larger one. You can put a really big battery in there, so that is really cool. And then obviously you have the ability to change the length of and positioning of your stock there, which is very difficult to do with one hand, but that is pretty sweet. The hardware is pretty easily attainable. Silver Fox actually sells a hardware kit currently, so that's probably the easiest way to get it, but sourcing some of the parts yourself is not too difficult, except for maybe these bars here. But I would, if you're in the US, getting a hardware kit from Silver Fox is probably the easiest thing to do. Let's go ahead and show you guys what other thing is cool about this blaster, and probably actually I'm a little behind the times, but I think a first for me having either a P car or a B car option for a flywheel setup. So that's pretty sweet. You can pull this guy out, and this is a bearing scar currently, and I have a few to test, but we have another one. There's lots of different options of twist for your B car. So depending on what FPS setup you're using, you will want to coordinate the correct angle for your B car with that. And there's also a P car option. P car may be the way to go if you want to keep the highest FPS, but we will test all that out soon enough. So obviously you have the Picatinny rail on top, so you can put any optic up there you want. There's also a Picatinny rail underneath this foregrip here. There's a few different foregrip options. This is the long one, so you can grip it, kind of have multiple gripping options there. There's also a mini one, so if you just want the mag gripper option, that's pretty sweet. And then it allows you to attach anything to the front of that Picatinny rail, or you could go without any sort of grip if you choose that option. So I've gone with the worker sling point option that has a little swivel on it. So if you want to buy a worker sling point, you can print this version out, but there's also just a 3D printed sling point option that's pretty simple and definitely gets the job done. So multiple options there, but where this thing really does well is obviously being able to swap out cages. So like I said, this is currently the 200 FPS setup, but we'll go ahead and show you how easy it is to throw in like a 130 HVZ setup. Just pop out 4 pins. 1, 2, 3. That pulls this guy off. And then 1 for the flywheel cage. And then that just pulls straight up. Woo. And you have banana connectors right here that pull out, and then you can just swap out your cage. Right here, we got a 42 millimeter, and these are Indoor Edition flywheels from Containment Crew. But pretty much any 42 millimeter cage should get you about 125 or so with half-length darts, I do believe, but we will test that out. Also will depend on what kind of scar you use. So there we go, that is our setup, and then we would just put the 4 pins back in, put this back on obviously first, and put all the pins back in, and we will be good to go. But there's another option up front here. Before we go ahead and assemble all that back, might as well go ahead and show you that. And there we go. Now we have a dual stage setup, which is pretty darn cool. Don't know how I feel about the longer P car coming out here, especially when the B car's in there. It's kind of strange, sticking out, kind of looks maybe not the best, but probably still gets the job done. I do think it seems a little loose here. So there is a few little things like that with this project, but overall I think it was built really well, and obviously things will be tweaked along the way. This has just been released, just out of beta for the most part, so that is pretty cool. I did put a little tape on the B car for when it has a single stage setup, just to be a little tighter on there, so that's why you see that. But this thing is pretty darn cool. So this currently does not have flywheels or motors in it, but they can go in here, and with a band blaster setup, you could get definitely 250, if not closer to 270 or more FPS out of this thing, and that's just insane. I don't really have a place to use something like that, so that's why I haven't assembled this with any flywheels, but I wanted to print this out to give myself that option in the future and to show you guys what it would look like. So this is definitely a beast and would be really, really effective in a high FPS battle. So as I was saying briefly, there are many stock options for this blaster. This one is the rod stock with the large rod stock, I guess, the large battery tray. This is the top battery tray. There's also one that has a door on the back, so you can put the battery in the back, I believe. I feel like this makes more sense to me, just because it seems to be easier with the stock there. There's a shorter one, like I was saying. There's also a fixed stock. There's also a buffer tube option. And then I think there's also a flat bar stock option currently, but I think these are open source files, so people can basically do whatever they want. If they want to create a new, stock option for this. I don't know how practical stock options would be without a good sized battery tray involved into that design, but I guess there's always other ways to mount batteries besides just internally and cleanly into a stock. Nevertheless, I think that makes the most sense for me, and I feel like this is the best stock option for me personally, especially if you want to use, you know, a dual flywheel setup, you're gonna need a pretty darn good sized battery to power that. This does not really have room for a MOSFET, which is something that I kind of wish was added, so you could add some sort of MOSFET setup, especially for a dual stage. I think that would have been helpful, but being able to use a battery that can run a dual stage is very important. So that size battery tray was very important for me, and that's why I went with this one. This is a little cheek rest up here, if you're wondering what that is. I'm not sure honestly how well that works, but you know, it's a little bit, I feel like I'm a little more back here personally, but you know, I put it on there just to complete the look. Obviously we have a thumb screw here that is how we get into the battery tray. And right now I have just a 1000 milliamp hour Turnigy 3S LiPo in there. We'll go ahead and connect this thing up and get it ready to fire it off here. There's also plenty of room for a voltage alarm in here, assuming you're not using an absolutely massive battery. So that's pretty sweet. And so we're set up there. We'll go ahead and throw in some flywheels. We'll go back to the band blaster setup first, show you guys that for a 200 FPS cap war. I think it'd be perfect for, and then we will go over a really cool HVZ setup. So let's get this thing ready and put it over the chronograph and see what she's got. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take the band blaster setup and put it over the chronograph. Got the P car installed, so we'll see what kind of performance we get, and then we'll try some of the B cars, which we'll get to in a second. $196, $185, $179, $178, $184, $186, $199, $177, $175, $183, $196, $180. Those things scream. Hopefully I can dial down the audio there for you, but yeah, that's a loud setup, but it performs pretty darn awesome. Definitely getting up there right under 200 FPS, which is perfect. Would have liked to see a little more consistency. I don't know if that has to do with the P car kind of making it a little more inconsistent. We'll see if the B car is more consistent or not. But like I said, I have two setups. So we are going to be testing this for the first time. This is the setup that is recommended. These are the bearings they recommend. I believe these are a 3 by 7 millimeter bearing, and these are actually a little smaller bearing that I have, because when I put these in and I put a dart through it, it really seemed like it put a lot of friction on the dart, like it touches the dart quite a bit. So it may really hurt FPS. That's my guess. Like I said, I haven't even tested this yet. So I went ahead and did another one with the exact same twist on it. But this one has I think it's a bearing I had on hand, 2.5 millimeter by 6 millimeter. So should be a little smaller, and it still touches the dart, so it still should function. But we'll have to test this out. Definitely put it over the chronograph, but we will put some shots on the range with them also and see how they fly. So it will be interesting to find out. I think a 3 by 6 may be better, but you know, it should still work fine. We will find out though. All right, so this is the 7 millimeter bearing, which is what they recommend. So we'll see how that does. 174, 168, 182, 177, 19. I don't think that was right. Huh. 174, 156, 169, 173, 163. Hopefully you're reading those, because I don't know if you could hear me say the FPS. These things be loud, but definitely hurt performance a little bit, but probably was definitely more accurate, I'm sure, than the P car, just because this will put spin on the dart. But like I said, we'll have to put it on the range and kind of see how that works out. But we'll go ahead and test the other B car and see if it gets a little bit better FPS. All right, 6 millimeter B car, here we go. 168, 173, 173, 177, 179, 174, 175, 174, 177, 178, 177. Ooh, all right, calm down there. Calm down. You've done good. That was much more consistent. That may be a winner. Very much like that. Obviously, the performance is less than the P-Car, so depending on if you're going for accuracy or performance, you know, we'll see. I mean, sometimes you don't really need a super accurate flywheeler if you can just spray a lot of darts at your opponent, but definitely pretty sweet that worked out a little more consistent, so that may be something to look at. Maybe a little smaller bearing may be the way to go for this setup, but we will find out when we see some shots downrange, because that will be the true test. Let's go ahead and load this baby back up and put some shots on the range. All right, we have 15 darts loaded up, and we're going to use the P-Car again, see how we do. Shots downrange, kind of just seeing how they fly. I'll let you know, because I know it's very difficult to see that on camera. Unfortunately, we don't have cameras that can pick that up yet, but we'll see how we do here. Whew. To be honest, those flew really accurately for a flywheeler, in my opinion. I did use this exact setup in a war, and it performed really well. So we'll see how the B-Car does, but it's going to be hard to top that, in my opinion. And honestly, I thought those darts were spinning, so this may put a little spin on the dart. I am not sure. It doesn't look like they have a twist on it in there. It looks straight to me, so I'm not positive, but nevertheless, that did really well. And I love how easy it is just to put this in, twist it, lock it in, take it out. Really awesome. All right, B-Car loaded, 7x3, and we have 10 darts this time. Try to save some time here. We should be able to get a good idea with 10. Here we go. I will say that was more accurate. Those were lasers. That was impressive. Definitely not quite as much range though. All right, smaller bearing B-Car, here we go. So those were all very accurate, very impressive out of all three setups. So it's going to be kind of personal preference what you want. Definitely the B-Car was a little more accurate, less performance. Both options were very good. I felt like this one may have been a little less accurate than the other, which may have had to do with this little bit of slot, because it's a 2.5 millimeter to a 3. But I do think a little smaller bearing may allow for a little higher FPS. And still get you that accuracy. I don't know, something to play with, but definitely cool options there. And it's just really cool. You just pull them right out, put them right in. But a little tape on there does help out, make it a little bit tighter fit. There are two different versions. I printed the tight version, but still needed to be a little tighter, which was interesting. We will get into tolerances and things like that, and just how the whole printing process in my review at the end. But yeah, really liking this thing. Let's go ahead and check out the HVZ setup, because I think that's going to be a popular one for a lot of people. All right, so went ahead and installed the 42 millimeter HVZ setup. This should get us under 130 FPS, no question. We have the P-Car installed, and I threw on a Pico booper and the new foregrip here. Just to give you guys an idea of what you could possibly do with this setup. Obviously, you could put a flashlight under there, you know, kind of depending on what your needs are, what your game allows, what your game requires. But yeah, definitely a pretty cool setup, and got this one set up for XLs. So yeah, if you can use green gas and 40 wad shell in your game, this is definitely a pretty cool setup in my opinion. Gives you a pretty good placement there to push. Could be useful this this end war. We'll see. I'm not sure this is what I'm going to run, but it'll definitely be along for the ride. So let's go ahead, see what kind of performance we're getting. 118, 130, 124, 123, 115, 118, 128, 134, 118, 123. I'd say that's pretty solid. We had one that went over 130, probably just an error by the chronograph. You know, chronographs are not consistent at all. They read inconsistently, so to have a hard cap on a chronograph is kind of silly to me, but yeah, that performance I think is pretty darn solid. So let's go ahead and try it with the B car. All right, B car installed. That should help actually even bring the FPS down even more and in theory make it more accurate. So let's go ahead and see what this thing's got. 102, 108, 97, 94, 110, 101, 99, 93, 98, 100. So honestly, if you take this to an HVZ event and you're hitting a little higher than their chronograph or their admins like, throw in the B car and you should be much lower than that. Obviously, that definitely brings down that performance. B car, probably not the best option for low FPS blasters in my opinion. I think you're not gonna gain as much accuracy as you're gonna be losing in performance, but it is an option. That being said, this is the 7 degree, more for the 180 to 200 FPS setup. I haven't printed out one and set one up for this setup because I probably won't use it. I'm not sure it's gonna make that much difference, but they do recommend more of a 10 degree. But we'll go ahead and put both options over the range and see how they fly. All right, let's go ahead and put some shots on the range with the HVZ setup and the P car installed. I honestly say that's pretty darn accurate, especially for HVZ. I feel like that's gonna be plenty fine. I mean, you're not normally shooting at people that range. Probably isn't necessarily a good idea to waste ammo trying to hit a zombie that range, but nevertheless, if you want to, you may be even able to hit them because that is pretty darn accurate. Pretty impressive. We'll go ahead and try the B car, even though it's not the perfect setup for this FPS. Okay, 10 darts, B car, let's go. Honestly, I felt like that did pretty well. This is the 7 degree. They recommend more of the 10 for this FPS, but I don't think that was too bad. I felt like it was pretty accurate. I felt like they might have all been going a little right with that spin, so maybe you'd get straighter shots, but it was consistent, so that's the most important thing, really. But that being said, I feel like the P car is a pretty solid option, but you know, it's pretty easy if you have a printer, obviously, to print both the options out as long as you have the bearings and to see what's best for you. So let's go ahead and take it back to the couch and I'll give you my final review, going over kind of the printing process and kind of the pluses and minuses. I feel like maybe some improvements that could be made, and yeah, let's go chat about it. All right, so obviously that was just a taste of what this thing is capable of. This thing is a pretty awesome design in my opinion, and super excited to see what else comes out with this blaster. Really excited for the possibility of select fire with a solenoid pusher. That will be super cool. They should have the full auto version out soon for everybody to get their hands on that. Straight full auto isn't really something I normally run too much, so that's not really something I plan on doing, but I am excited for the select fire, and if that does get released and this video does well, I may have to do a follow-up video to this because that would be pretty cool to show off. And maybe I'll get Flywheels and Motors in that dual cage setup if I get enough likes and enough love on this video, and we'll see the true powerhouse this thing can be. But I think all in all, this thing is awesome. The printing process was good for the most part. You have your standard cleanup. There's really the only part that I had trouble printing was the magwell portion. I cleaned it up pretty well. It's probably hard to see, but it just is that angle. It prints sitting like this, and that angle is pretty steep and just makes it hard to print cleanly, especially in PETG. I feel like that made it a little more difficult. This is printed in mostly PETG. Both the purple and black are PETG. The orange is Pro PLA, and then the blue is, obviously these are all my standard colors, but the blue is just PLA from Filamentum. So definitely check this out. I'll put everything down in the description box to where you can find the hardware kit, where you can find the files for this. I cannot wait for more to happen with this. Like I said, they are planning on doing a full-length version, so if you're not into half-lengths and you want full lengths, there will be that version of eventually. Really excited about the select fire option. I think that'd be sweet. Would love to see some room added for a MOSFET, especially if they come out with that select fire option. Feel like that would be nice to have some sort of small board in there that we could use just to protect the blaster a little bit, especially if you're using those dual stage setups. But nevertheless, I think it's a pretty rock solid blaster, and I'm really excited to see what more comes out, what more people do with this thing. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please smash that like button. It really helps out the channel. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications. And as always, guys, peace out.